Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Wine. Welcome back to art class. Today is day 4 of our wish tree project, and today we will work to finish our artwork. Our studio session learning target says, I can add details inspired by other artists and the book, The Wish Tree. So before we get started, let's gather all the supplies that we will need. You will need your paper from last week where you blended colors to create your sky using crayon or watercolor. You will need the clouds that you used the tearing technique to create. You will need glue stick or glue bottle. You will need crayons. And optional means you might want to use black or brown construction paper and maybe scissors. So let's take a quick look at some ideas that we could use to inspire our artwork. Think about the book, The Wish Tree. What do you remember from this book? What details could you borrow from the story to add to your artwork? Remember the story of Charles and his sled Boggin and their adventure through the forest looking for the wish tree? You could include trees to finish your artwork, just like in the story. You could also include some of the animals that Charles met along the way. You could include kids, sleds, a snowman, or a house. Anything that you practice sketching from the book, you could use to inspire your final artwork. But let's take a look at how some other artists are inspired by nature. This first painting on the left is by the American artist Georgia O'Keeffe. Look how she uses many lines that have soft, simple curves, and how those curved lines create big curved shapes. This shape looks like the moon and reminds me from the moon in the story, The Wish Tree. I don't see a tree in Georgia O'Keeffe's artwork, but I do see this curved shape that reminds me of a cactus. So you could borrow some ideas from Georgia O'Keeffe and use curved lines and curved shapes to finish your artwork. Here's another artwork. This one is by the artist Henri Matisse. Yes, Henri Matisse is the artist that we studied in our collage project. Before he started making his paper cutouts, he was a painter. Look at his sky and his clouds. But what else do you notice? Matisse created interest in his artwork by adding these ovals and circles that make the artwork abstract and just look like they're floating in the sky. You could consider adding 1 or 2 shapes and repeating those shapes to finish your artwork and make it look abstract. If you want to add a tree, here's another artist that might inspire you. All 3 of these paintings are by the Swiss artist Paul Klee. You will learn more about Paul Klee in 2nd and 5th grade. But one of the things that Paul Klee did in many of his works is he created trees that were made up of very simple lines. Look at the trees in these 2 artworks. They are not big enough to fill the whole page. So Paul Klee added some other things to fill his page. In the artwork at the bottom, we see this circle. Maybe it's the moon or maybe it's the sun, but it's just a simple circle. We also see that he used these straight lines that seem to crisscross each other and helped fill up his page. Not too many lines, but just a few to make the artwork interesting. Look at the artwork at the top. Again, it has some simple lines that crisscross, but this time he colored in those spaces to make them look like rectangles, and those rectangles help fill up his paper. Also notice he included this round circle, which makes me think of the sun. I'm going to ask that for this project, if you want to add a sun, please borrow this idea and be inspired by Paul Klee. Just make your sun a simple circle with no lines poking out from it. Just the simple circle will make an interesting sun and help keep your work looking abstract. Sometimes Paul Klee made a tree so big that it filled up his whole page and he didn't need to add anything extra. Look at this tree by Paul Klee. Both the tree trunk and the big branches are created with just very simple straight lines. So you could use just straight lines to create your tree, and you could use any style you want. Vincent van Gogh is the artist most famous for his painting of The Starry Night. But he also created trees in many of his artworks. Notice in the drawing at the left, his tree trunk, his big branches, and the tiny twigs remind me of the Y trees that we practice sketching in class. But look at the painting on the right. Here, his tree trunks and the branches are made up of twisting, wiggling, curving lines. All of those lines seem to twist around each other as he creates his trees to fill his page. Piet Mondrian is an artist who was inspired by Van Gogh. And Piet Mondrian happens to be the artist that we're going to study in our next project. Look at how Piet Mondrian's tree on the right uses those wiggling, twisting lines for the branches and the twigs that remind me of Van Gogh's lines. But also look at the top, I see just a simple circle. Maybe it's the moon or maybe it's the sun, but it's just a small, simple circle. As Piet Mondrian worked, his artwork got more and more abstract. On the left, we see a tree that Mondrian created that uses a few straight lines for the tree trunk, but many of the lines for the trunk and the branches are made up of these very simple curves, like little short rainbow lines that are turned all different directions and crisscross each other. So again, you could borrow the idea of these simple curved rainbow lines or these twisting wiggly lines when you create your tree if you want to use a tree to finish your artwork. So if you plan to use a tree, think about what we learned about trees at the beginning of this project when we were sketching. You should have the tremendous tree trunk, big branches, and tiny twigs. It is not necessary to include leaves or to include the roots. Think about how we practice drawing trees using the Y technique. And if you want, you could even use the collage idea to create a tree. Please make sure before you start your final artwork, you watch my demonstration video where I will show you how to use black and brown construction paper to create a tree by cutting paper or by tearing paper. That might give you even more ideas to inspire you. And then finally, you're ready to put everything together. Find your clouds from last week, decide where you want them, and glue your clouds onto your paper. Then think about what else you will use to finish your artwork. Do you want to add trees? What technique will you use? Will you use just one big tree, or will you use 2 or more trees to fill up your page? Here I use the idea of the element of space because my tree is big at the bottom to show it's near and tiny at the top to show it's far. Or you don't even have to include a tree. This artwork just uses that tiny circle for the sun and a big, simple curved line that goes all the way through the artwork and really fills up the page. As you're working, keep in mind that these are the things you need to do to create your best artwork. You want to use the elements of line and shape to create the details. Do your organic cloud shapes help fill the page? Did you use 1 or 2 kinds of lines and shapes to help create unity? Notice when I made my trees, I used just straight lines for both of the trees. Notice that the artwork in the bottom, it includes just one big curved line. Do my lines and shapes really help fill the page? Are my collage objects, like my clouds and trees, glued down securely with very little glue showing? Are my lines and shapes drawn and cut smoothly and neatly? And if I'm coloring things in, did I color them neatly with no peekaboos? Finally, look at how you're using your creativity and your own ideas. Do your details, such as trees and other objects or abstract shapes, help make your art unique? Did you use the illustrations and the artists to inspire you, but not to copy exactly? I cannot wait to see how you finish your wish tree artwork. Remember, when you're finished, have a grown-up help you take a photo and send me the photo in Google Classroom or in Dojo. I hope you have a wonderful week and keep on creating.